Okay, thanks for being here today, everybody. This is our last Symbiota support group of the year, so our December session. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about the personal observation profiles, which will be of wide relevance to hopefully a lot of you folks if you work in collections or if you just work as a collector. What we're going to talk about today is going to be extra helpful for you. So first, a few announcements. I wanted to let you know that we now have a new documentation page for everything that I'm going to talk about today. In fact, it's a whole new section of our Symbiota Docs guide. If you just go to our Symbiota Docs page, you'll see that there are some overarching guides or subjects. And so now in this collector observer guide, that's where you can find this information about personal observation profiles, also called research observation profiles, also called a number of other things that I'll refer to later on. So that is there and now available for your perusal. I'll also go ahead and put the link in the chat. That's just to the sending data. Here's to the general page. So you should be able to look at that written documentation in the future as well. Secondly, we are, as you probably have heard, launching portal campaigns, and these are month-long focused efforts to help a specific Symbiota portal with any aspect that they need. Generally, we work on data cleaning and data publishing. We've done these for a number of portals, including the CERNEC portal, the macroalgae portal, the MICO portal, the Teredo portal. So if you think that your portal community would engage in a portal campaign and you would like to see some movement forward in data cleaning and mobilization, let us know, and we'd be happy to schedule a portal campaign for your community. Also, just kind of a note, I was notified that our help email is down this morning. So if you need to send me a question or send us a question, feel free to send directly to one of the Symbiota folks. So here is my email in the chat. So if you are unable to go through help@symbiota.org, feel free to send me an email and I'll make sure it gets to the right place. All right, I'm going to take a moment just to ask whether anyone in the participants has any announcements about their portals or anything that's going on, new TCN grants, I don't know. And feel free to put any announcements in the chat too. All right, well, feel free to share information in the chat, like I said, and we can move forward with our today's topic, which is going to be personal observation profiles. So we're going to talk about what personal observation profiles are, what are they used for, and then how to use them. This is a kind of lesser known aspect of Symbiota, but it's really, really helpful, especially for collectors who may be affiliated with one to many different collections. Okay, so personal observation profiles, they go by many names, and I'm going to kind of just show you where to find them. So if you're, for example, in the SciNet network, and you go to specimen search or search collections, and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see that there's kind of this line here, and everything above this line represents a collection. So usually, in this case, an herbarium or collection of plants. And then everything below this line is an observational profile. So that is based on observations, not necessarily specimens. So there are multiple different projects, but there is this one profile here that's called General Research Observations. And that is the personal observation management profile for this particular portal. In the bryophyte herbaria, if you go to search collections and you go all the way down, you'll see this one is called General Observation and Personal Collections. And then in the Consortium of California Herbaria portal, if you go to search collections and you scroll all the way down, this one is called Specimens Being Processed. And so there is usually one, there can be, I think, a couple of these particular types of observational profiles, but this is the central one. So as you can see, this is just kind of another showing of the multiple names that they go by in the portals. So what is this general observation profile? It is a central location, a central collection, so to speak, of observations that can be accessed and edited by any sponsored editor. So you can think of sponsored editors. They can only manage the data that they have entered into their collection, which is unique, because in a normal collection in a Symbiota portal, you can assign multiple editors to the collection, and all of the editors can access all of the data in that collection. However, in the personal observation profiles, it's one data set, but any particular editor can only edit the specimens that they have put into that set. So giving someone editor access means you can add that, or that person can add specimens to that collection and edit their own specimens within that collection, but they don't necessarily have access to anyone else's specimens in that collection. So you can think of it as this is a one big pool of data, but each person only has a small chunk of that pool. They can only access a small chunk of that pool. So the data in personal observation profiles, even though they can only be edited by one person, just like all specimens in a Symbiota portal, they are publicly available for searching. So these are not private databases where people can just keep their own secret data and no one's ever going to see it. This is still made public immediately as you add specimens to the portal. You can redact the localities just as you can in a normal collection, but just the data itself, whatever you're entering in there, is publicly accessible. And then another important note is that when you're entering data in these personal observation profiles, the basis of record, which is a specific field that indicates whether it's a specimen or an observation, is by default set to human observation. So that's just because it doesn't represent necessarily an accessioned specimen that is in a collection at that time. But you can change it. So this basis of record field is at the very bottom of the occurrence editor. It's a drop-down list. And so if you do have a physical specimen and you want to send that specimen somewhere, you can change that basis of record to preserved specimen, which is the specimen controlled vocabulary. Okay, so why do we have this collection type? Why is it useful? What is it used for? Well, I put it in a little bit of a workflow diagram for clarity. So how these were designed to be used is generally collectors or people who are going to make observations or are generally going to collect data that they hope to see in a portal, maybe even in a herbarium at some point. They will go into the field and they will collect their specimens and then they will record their field notes. And what has generally happened is they record the field notes, they put the data in their own personal database, they print out the labels, they send it to the herbarium, and then the herbarium has to type out all those labels again into their own database. And then that just means that this data have been transcribed 2 times, which is a waste of time. So the way that these are built is so that the specimen collector transcribes their field notes into a Symbiota portal. So this way, there's no problem with are we using the right fields, or how do we know how to map their meaning of this type of field description to my field description. It's all happening in the same portal. So they can transcribe their field notes into a Symbiota portal. And then from that Symbiota portal, in that personal observation profile, they have the ability to print specimen labels directly from the portal using all the same built-in tools. And then, because all the data is in this nice standardized format, they can just send that specimen label and the data and the specimen directly to the collection that is going to accession that specimen into their own collection. So there are multiple ways that you can send specimen data, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is the general workflow that that is enabled by these personal observation profiles. This way you avoid transcribing twice, you avoid having to map the data in different ways, and you give a lot of power to the collector because they're able to see where their data is going, and they can format the label. All right, so how do we use these personal specimen observation profiles in practice? Well, you use them almost just like a collection. There are fewer tools, but there are still quite a few useful tools available in this type of collection. Let me go ahead and open that up and just show you what those tools are. Okay, so as a collector, you access it the same way that you would access any other collections that you manage. You go to your home, you go to My Profile, Occurrence Management, and then if you have been given or if you have been sponsored as a personal observation profile editor, then you will see this box here at the top. Sorry, I really got something in my throat today. So this box is going to be named according to whatever the personal observation profile name is. So in this portal, it's called Specimens Being Processed. And you can see the options that I have here. So I can look at all the records that I have entered into my own Specimens Being Processed observational records. So if I click Display All Records, I'll see the whole one specimen that I personally have in here, which is different than if you did a public search and I said, okay, I want all of these in the United States. You would see that there are over 6,000. The difference between what is actually in that data set and what I can access is that I can only access, again, the things that I have entered there. You can also search records. It's still only going to search within your own records. So if you wanted to do a search within the entire specimens being processed or personal observation management, then you'd have to do that through the public interface. You can add new records here. And so if I click Add New Record, it's going to give me the same data entry panel or data entry form that you would if you were entering some other into some other collection. And there's really good documentation about what should go in all of these fields. And if you click one of these little question marks, it'll take you to a page that will explain the fields too. You can also print labels. And I won't go into detail about this because we've had a previous Symbiota support group meeting talking about this, but we have some really nice label printing tools, including an interface where you can drag and drop the fields that you want, and then you can format each of those individual fields however you want. Here you can also print annotation labels. if you need to annotate any specimens, you brought them in 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and the names changed. And so you have to send those updated names or updated annotation labels along with your specimens when you're actually sending them to the herbarium. You can do that here too. Diana asks, does the duplicates functionality work to copy duplicate locality information for multiple specimen collection days? Duplicates functionality work to copy duplicate locality information. I think it only goes based on a single day. It depends on whether the collector number is similar. So I think what you're asking, Diana, is when I go to add a new record, and if I enter my collector name, number, and date, and if I click this duplicates, then it will show me all of the specimens in the entire database, including the collections, including the observations, that might have the same name, number, and date. And it also checks a couple numbers up and a couple numbers down. So it's going to, I think that it will go a couple of days before and a couple of days after, as long as those collection numbers are similar. And if you do find some specimen data that you want to bring in, then you can click one of the buttons that says transfer all fields or transfer empty fields only, and that can pull in the duplicate data. Does that answer your question, Diana? Yes, exactly. The duplicates function is the exact same duplicates function that you would see in the entire portal. Okay, a couple of other options that you have. You can submit image vouchered observations. So if you start with an image, like a field image, you can upload that right into the portal and then enter in some of the data fields, and you can go and edit that later. But this way you can basically create a record from an image. Oh, and I didn't mention that when you have images, or sorry, when you have specimens in this personal observation profile, you can add determinations, you could add images, you can add linked resources and traits, just as you can with any other specimen. So if you have additional annotations, you have traits, images, you can load them all up in there, just like any other specimen. All right, you can also view and verify any edits that you have made to your specimens. So if I click this review, verify edits, it gives me a list of all the edits that I have done to my specimens in this personal observation profile. So that can be useful for just tracking the things that you have done to your specimens. You can download all of your data. There is not a tool that you can use to download a subset of your data, at least not here. But what you could do is you could do a public search, including just specimens being processed. And let's say I'm just doing myself and whatever other search criteria I wanted to do. And then you could download it from here, just like you would any other data set from the portal. And then because these specimens or these records are publicly available, that means they're also publicly available for comment. So you can use this specimens being processed box or personal observations box to view user comments. So if anyone has made a comment on any of your observations or your specimens, then they will be visible there. Okay, so once you have all of these data, you've entered all your field notes directly into those forms. What can you do with those data? How do you get those to maybe the herbaria where you're going to deposit the specimens, or the collection where you're going to deposit those specimens? You can transfer your data, transfer and or copy your data. And I'm going to tell you about 3 ways that you can transfer your data. One way is to directly transfer your data from your personal observation into another collection. And this means removing it from your personal observation and reassigning it to another collection. This you can only do if you're an administrator for the other collection, because you don't want the ability to just like have random people throw specimens into your collection. So you would probably want to talk to the place where you're going to give the specimens to see if they're willing to give you that access. And if they're not, there are plenty of other ways of doing it. But if you are one of the main collectors, maybe they're going to want you to do that. And I'll show you how to do that. So that would be, if I go into my occurrence management and look at my records, I'll just open up one of my records. If I go into this admin tab, there's a box called transfer specimen. This means take it out of my current collection and put it into a different collection. So I could select the Hoover herbarium, for example, and click transfer record, and then that record would go into the Hoover herbarium and I would no longer have access to it through my personal observation profile, but I could go edit it in the Hoover herbarium because I have the admin access to that collection. Sue has a question. Is there a plan to alert users when there is a comment? I often don't know they are there unless I go directly to the occurrence management page. No, Sue, we currently don't have a notification system set up with comments. We're hoping that people will also email the curators, but we just figure that if there are too many comment notifications, then that would quickly be a lot of emails. But that is a great thought. To be able to turn that on and off would be really useful. Allison asks, does the record stay in your OBS collection after it is transferred, or is it removed? It is removed. When you use this option, then it gets removed from your personal observation profile and it goes into the target collection. But that's not the only way of getting data into other collections. So that's the direct version. There are also some more indirect versions. And there are two ways of doing this. One is downloading your data and then taking out the specimens that you do want to keep. And then you can send those data to the other collection and they can import it into their home database. That database could be in that same portal, or it could be a totally different database. Because the data coming out of a Symbiota portal are in Darwin Core archive format, it'll probably be pretty simple for them to import those data into their database. And then there's another way that you can get those data without having to download and re-upload. And that is that when the collection gets your specimens, like the physical specimens, then they can basically check in the specimens into their collection if they live manage in a Symbiota portal by using the duplicates function. So what they could do is, let's say that I want this particular specimen in the Hoover herbarium collection, but I don't want to transfer it because I still want to be able to manage all of my collection data in my personal observations profile. But I also want a copy of it to go to Hoover. So let's say I was a data entry person for the Hoover herbarium. I would go into the Hoover herbarium and I would click add new occurrence record. And I'm looking, oh, I need to go get my information. So I have this particular specimen of Fritillaria in front of me. And I go to enter it into the database. And I say, Katie Pearson collected it and she collected it on this date. Do you have these data in here? And if I click duplicates, you're going to be able to use the duplicate matching tool to find those data. And if I do find that these are the exact same data that I want to import, I can click transfer all fields. I'm not exactly sure why it didn't bring the scientific name. Oh, it's because it's a possible matching duplicate event. So because I didn't have a collector number, it wasn't absolutely sure that this was the same specimen. But if I had put in a number that matched exactly with the collection number that was in the observation profile, then it would have said, these are potential exact duplicates. Do you want to bring all these data in? And then it would have brought in the scientific name as well. So you transfer to all fields, and then all the fields that were changed are going to be shown in blue. I'm going to put this name in here. And then I could add that record. So this would have to be done on a 1-by-1 basis, but it is a nice way that the curators can, or the data enterers can make sure that all of the correct data is as expected and in the format that you want in that collection as well. Because sometimes collectors will have their own conventions for doing things. And maybe, you put county in the county name, but the collector doesn't put the whole county in the county name, whatever. You can do any manipulations as you go. Okay, so there's some other questions. And James is answering them. Thanks, James. Diana asks, can you send to multiple collections? And as James says, yes, they can pull in the data using the duplicates function, or you can send them a copy of your data. So one nice thing about being able to manage collectors' data and also the specimen data in a personal observation management profile is because then that original observation becomes kind of like the first point of contact between a lot of duplicates potentially. And so then what a curator can do, and also what a collector can do, I think this is not enabled yet, but it will be, is that a collection can go in and go to their duplicate clustering tool, and they can look at the duplicate clusters that have been created. So this is one duplicate cluster of a collector whose last name was Beetle, and their number was 1566, and it was collected on this specific day. And these are all the specimens. These are all duplicates of this one particular specimen. And then if one of these is based in the personal observation management profile, then you are able to look at the original specimen or the original observation relative to your data. You can also do that just within a specimen page. Actually, I should go back, find it here. So if I were just on the page for this particular specimen, it's going to have to load first before I can view it. When I'm on a page for a particular specimen, then I can look at their duplicates, and I can see whether any of these are the ones that are linked particularly to that the first observational specimen collection, whatever, what have you. And there's also a tool in the duplicate management that allows you to look at specimen duplicate clusters that have different identifications. So this can be useful for both collectors and for collections. If their specimen has been re-identified to something else by some other collection, then they can go in and look for that and maybe decide whether they need to update their own collection or their own specimen.
Katie, can I ask a question?
For sure.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I was a little bit late. If a collector puts all of their data in their collection management, then like Carl and Annie are kind of having a discussion about, can you bulk import those observations into your collection? Like clearly the data is there. So if you're doing specimen by specimen entry, it'll pop up and you'll import the data. But if the collector, let's say, is managing their collections here, then downloads their records. Now you have a CSV file or something. Maybe they like delete some of them and then they send that CSV to some collection and say, okay, here's all the specimens I'm sending you. Does that, oh, you've already anticipated my question, maybe. Anyway, I'm wondering, like, then if that collection imports that CSV, is that actually still linked now to that personal observation?
That's a good question. It is not automatically linked, but if you run the batch link algorithm, which is also in that duplicate clustering,
then it will
link it. So how all these duplicate clusters came to be is by multiple different ways, but probably the easiest way is if you go into duplicate clustering and you click this batch link specimen duplicates, and it will look for each specimen that you have, it'll look for the collector name, date, and number. And if any collection has that same name, date, and number, it's going to link those as duplicates. So if you run this batch linking script after you've uploaded all your collectors' data, then it's going to automatically link all of those specimens together. So great question, Jen. Thanks.
And is that the kind of, like, do you push that button once a month? Or
that would make sense. Yeah, I think this is a relatively underexplored and under-known tool. We should probably have a whole nother Symbiota support group on just duplicates. But yeah, ideally.
And can you, as the collector, if you just go into your collections, can you see the duplicates from that view?
From this screen, or?
No, not from the duplicate, because here you're like, right now, I assume that you got here because you're an administrator of this collection. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
But if you were just a collector and you're managing your personal observations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Sue, I think, is asking the same question. Right now, you can't look at duplicate clusters through your personal observation profile. But if I remember correctly, we have just integrated that code into the main code base, and it should be filtering out to most portals in the next few weeks. Terry asks, what is an easy way for the host institution to review all of their sponsored personal observation records not yet shared with the herbarium? An easy way for the host institution to review all of their sponsored personal observation records. So you're saying specimens that are in the observational profiles belonging to people that you have sponsored.
Yes.
But are not in Davis, for example.
Yes.
I don't think there is an easy way to do that. There's not like a tool to do that.
So we would just have to look in the public view. Is there a way to search by in the public view by username?
By collector, yeah. James has an answer.
Oh, okay.
So it's possible for a collections administrator to be made an admin of a personal observation collection.
Oh.
And that can only be done, I think, by a portal super admin. I'm not sure about that. It has to be done through the sitemap user permissions. And when you're an admin, you have an extra checkbox button under the search box of, the normal search, where you can show records from other users.
Okay.
So I think Katie's an admin, so we could see if it works for her. Yep, that's what it is.
That being said, few people are given those permissions because then you can view everybody's data and edit everybody's data. So I think that usually those are limited to super admins.
And Katie, am I right in that the reason for that is when people are managing their observations as their own stuff, it's like their data. And so nobody messes with that except for the owner of those data.
Yes, exactly. Terry, I think back to your question, I think that doing a search through the public interface would probably be your best bet. Or if you have a specific query, like, can you look for all of these particular usernames, then you could ask a super administrator to do a specific query for you using the tools that James pointed out.
Okay.
All right, any questions about this? It's a kind of hard to get the mind wrapped around the first time you think about it, but the general gist is you have your data can be in a personal observation profile, and you can do all the edits that you want to it. And then you can send those data either by transferring directly if you're an administrator for that collection, or by giving them a CSV file, or by them individually bringing in those data using the duplicate matching functions. And then those data can be linked as duplicates, depending on whether you have done one or one of those two import versions or workflows.
I'm curious for people who are using this, or who collectors that use it, or collectors, collections who tell collectors about it. Like, I'm just curious if anybody has, like an email explanation or instructions, or how are you convincing people that this is a good method to start to manage your data? Has anybody dealt with that?
I haven't dealt with it from a curator or administrator point of view, but I'm a collector and I have 5,000 plus records in the ARIDS plant database. So I'm an end user as well as a searcher of data. And I've been giving people little mini trainings on my own, but it could really use like a workshop structure for the end users, for the records enterers.
So I'm in the same boat, and I'm just sort of teaching people one by one. But one of the things I'm planning to work on in the short term is building more of a how-to. And I'm really happy to see that it's already now on the Symbiota docs. And so that's going to be my first link out to that, I guess. But yes, the collectors have found this hard to master at the very beginning.
Yeah, and I imagine that most collectors are currently working with an Excel spreadsheet. And so then it's like making the leap from the Excel spreadsheet management world to managing within the portal.
As a collections manager, I really like this because we currently have 20 or 30 people with editor rights, and some of them are actually correcting georeferencing, doing stuff like that, but most of them are just wanting to enter their specimen data, and it makes me nervous to have so many people able to edit. And I'm planning, or we're in the process of just converting all the people who don't need to edit the whole collection data over to being sponsored. And this is a really nice, it's a nice situation for us. And I'm glad that it's so seamless, and we'll be looking at creating protocols for people to print their own labels with our headings and footers. And so there'll be, we'll be having to make some little white papers to share with people, but it will make a lot of people pretty happy, because we've been giving out mail merge protocols and a lot of people just don't like it. So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I guess everybody who's made any of those things, like Mara said, she has a video tutorial and that sort of stuff, just send everything to Katie, because then she can link to it from the GitHub pages as well. So we have sort of like one aggregated place where people can get all the training materials that they want. That'd be great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there ever going to be a point in time where it's possible to share multiple permissions for personal observations such that multiple people can contribute to a personal observation account?
I don't know. I have not heard of that as being like on the wish list. You mean like being able to have multiple people accessing the same exact data?
Or
Because it's
just
a project or
multiple,
something
yeah,
that many
yeah,
people are contributing to.
exactly.
No, but in that case, you could just request to create a separate observational, like if you're going to be making, you're working on a flora particularly, you could just say, can we have a separate one? Which is what Mike Simpson has done in the CCH2. Like they have a separate one because they want multiple editors to be working on the same specimens at one time.
Wait, so Katie, let me just clarify that. Then they just made an account for that flora and all the collectors use that account to manage their data. Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying, but that is a good idea, a good way to go about that. What I was saying is they created a separate collection
Oh,
that's observations only. It's not a personal observations collection. It's just a completely different collection.
okay, that's cool.
And then there were some questions previously about image use instead of specimens. The example that I had shown was an observation that I had made on iNaturalist. And so I had just put the link to the iNaturalist on there. It's not a very secure link or sure, like quick link. It's just like in the notes field. But I know James is working on this. Do you have an update on that, James? Or it's just like work in progress?
Work in progress.
Cool.
I-
I know that also Mike Simpson is doing something similar where he will have a specimen and an iNaturalist observation. And what he does in that case is he has a on the specimen page. Let's see if I can find an example. And I don't really know if this is best practice. It's just what he's been doing. But I can't find one right now, but what he'll do is he'll link the iNaturalist link into the images tab. And so that when you click on the link to the image, it actually takes you to the iNaturalist observation, which is kind of cool. Like one way that you could do that. Let me see if I can find one. Or at least I'll show you where you would do that. So if you had an iNaturalist observation, for example, associated with this specimen, and you could go into images and add an image, and where it says URL, you could put the iNaturalist URL. That being said, it's just going to show up as a blank box as the URL because it's not actually pulling an image from that link. It's just basically putting a link there. What I would recommend to do instead is go into this linked resources tab and make an iNaturalist association. So that's when you would just put in a URL here. And again, this probably needs an entirely different Symbiota support group meeting, but you could put the iNaturalist observation URL here, and then that would create an association between the iNaturalist observation and the specimen.
Katie, what would you put in external identifier?
I think I would just leave it blank.
Okay.
I think maybe iNaturalist observations do have like an observation ID.
I think they do.
So you could probably go to, let's see. This is probably the ID right here in the URL.
Mhm.
So maybe I would put that there and then I would put this entire link, but it's a little bit redundant at that point. Ken, you have been patiently waiting. You have a question.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks. I'm not totally sure this is the right forum to ask this in, but I'm a little bit confused about. So I'm a user, and by the way, I have to say I absolutely love this whole project. I mean, it's a great way to organize my collection, and so I absolutely love it. It makes it much easier. I'd rather deal with this than an Excel spreadsheet for sure. Because, you know, those spreadsheets, oh my God, you know, there's so many rows and columns, it gets confusing. This is much easier to see and work with. I'm a little confused by the overlap, and maybe it doesn't matter, but there's a lot of overlap between the miscellaneous categories of habitat, substrate, associated taxa, description, and notes. And even clicking on the question mark doesn't really clarify that for me too much. And so does it matter like where I put things, you know, because, you know, it's on the substrate's an oak tree, associated taxa could be an oak tree, you know, notes could be that it's on an oak tree. Does any of that matter, or as long as you get it in there somewhere, that's all that counts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's definitely different approaches to it. We try to follow the Darwin core standards as best as we can. Let me just look for.
Well, I'll pipe in just while you're saying that. I think when you're actually dealing with collectors themselves and collectors doing the management of their data, that's where the most variation comes in. Because it used to be that collectors would do whatever they wanted on their own label, and then a curator would try to parse it in a way that was consistent with that herbarium. And that being said, each herbarium kind of has a different way of doing it as well. And so now that you have collectors being forced into those specific boxes, it brings up this question all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
That Darwin core, I mean, again, if you click on the question mark next to anything, you get the Symbiota data fields, which I think is the Darwin core stuff. And it's pretty vague, you know, and so that doesn't seem to help me a lot. It helps a little bit, but not a ton. So I don't know, maybe individual, you know, maybe the bryophyte people can have a longer document on what they want in their fields or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, usually the project that is doing the digitization will have their best practices or like their particular guide. Like the California Phonology Network developed a whole transcription guide and gives like more information about what they want going into each field. But then that might just differ between collections. Like at the Hoover Herbarium, we will duplicate information, like if it's substrate or if it's associated species, but there's also like some discussion of that, you know, like very frequent ambrosia in this region. Like we'll put ambrosia in the scientific name, but then we'll also put the very frequent ambrosia in this location goes into the habitat. So some collections will duplicate that information, but I know other collections say like, no, never put duplicate information in the fields. So it might depend on who you're sending the data to.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be collection specific if there's one herbarium that you work the most with and all of your vouchers go to, but otherwise just get it in there somewhere. The problem with any field that's just verbatim text is that it's not standardized in any way. It's very hard to do any analyses on it downstream. So just get the information in there somewhere so somebody understands the nature of the record.
Yeah.
Is it the notes field that's the one field that's not searchable? Or is that changed?
It's not searchable through the public interface. Correct. The occurrence remarks or notes field.
So just beware that some people won't be able to see what's in your notes field.
Or search by it. They'll see it, but they won't search by it. Sue, you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question, you know, because I use SciNet all the time to enter my own specimen records. There's all these things that pop up that I think could bear tweaking. I print my own labels and such. And do I just send them in an email to you or somebody? I mean, what's the best? Like, for example, I have 6 pages of observations now. So I've got to, whenever I go to the personal management of my occurrences, I have to keep hitting the forward button to get to the next page, next page, next page, next page until I'm finally at 5,000 or whatever. Can't you put a little arrow in there that gets me to the last page of my observations? You know what I'm saying? Am I explaining that?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. And I thought that already was there, but maybe it's not with.
I had talked to Ed about this years ago, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." But you know, maybe it's minor, but
Jordan is saying that he thinks it exists.
It doesn't exist on my interface.
Oh, okay.
What I do is next 1,000 records, next 1,000 records, next 1,000 records.
Is that just through the display all records, Sue?
Yes.
I would
because I-
recommend going to the search records, and then you could just search for where you're
Right.
looking for.
But I want the whole screen of records to show, because I enter like 40 at a time. So I want that, I want to be on that page that's showing my last 100 or whatever. Is
Are
that
you
not-
talking about the editor display or the table display?
The table display from which I will see, I'm at number 5185. I'll say enter new. I open that one up and then I clone it to make my next record because I'm often in the same locality with the same associated species and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like an easy fix.
I
to do
think you can
those
go,
records.
if you go into the occurrence editor, like from table view,
Yeah.
then you click on edit it, then you could go to the end.
I know, but it's like if those arrows were on table view, I think that
It just doesn't seem that, I mean, I'm not a programmer. I get you guys do a zillion things, but can't there just be one more button on that table view that just takes you to your last page?
James, can you do that?
Sure. But
Great.
I can't tell if it's actually there because I don't have a personal observations collection with more than 1,000. So can
Right.
you check to see what happens if you say show everybody's records?
Yeah, will do. Let me pull
But
up.
there are other things too that, for example, like the determined by box, now you put a name in one place, you put a date in the other place. And when you print your label, they're crushed together with no space between them. So it's like, who do I send those kind of tweets to?
help@symbiota.org.
Okay.
So Sue is right. There's only a page to the side.
So you want to get to the last page.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or I mean, I suppose you could have somebody want to search for a specific page, but I would be really happy with a last page.
Okay. I mean, I don't think that's hard. It just will require someone to spend time.
Have you tried like as a workaround in the meantime? Like I think you can sort it by like the number and you could switch like ascending and descending. So it starts with your last one. I don't know
I
if that would
can't-
be helpful.
I can't sort from this view, no.
Oh,
I mean,
weird.
my
Okay.
workaround is I just click through 6 pages. It's
Yeah,
not
okay.
huge.
Probably
It's
takes just as long as going to the
just as going to
search and then do the ascending, but that is a good option, Jordan.
So if you do make a search that works, you can save the link and then you can bookmark that link and always go to it.
Oh, that's cool.
That's a good point.
Okay.
So if you went into search records and then you said, give me my collector number descending.
Yeah.
Wait, can you change that record output? Oh, only to 3.
Oh,
Okay.
And then you
cool.
clicked link,
I-
oh,
You have to
only
play
3,000.
table first. Yeah, well, that worked. Okay.
then you
Good,
get a link. But you could bookmark that link and then it always takes you to the end of your specimen records.
That is a killer tip.
That is a great idea. Thank you.
Nice, James. Carl has a question. Does anyone use a 2-part system of spreadsheet into Symbiota? I'm anticipating my data entry workflow will be faster in the spreadsheet. One kind of tricky point in using personal observation profiles is there's not a public interface for batch uploading specimens into your profile, but a super admin can do that. So if you plan on doing that a lot, like maybe, I don't know, maybe figure out a different workaround. But if you plan on just doing that, you know, like, oh, I have my 5,000 legacy ones and then I want to start working in Symbiota, then it would be fine to just have a super admin uploaded in there.
And I see what you're saying, Carl. Like sometimes it's easier to just like select all the fields and then copy them down. But the record cloning tool is pretty fast. And anyway,
Yeah, I'm mostly being curmudgeonly, whatever. That's with all of us. I have my way of doing things. So I want to know whether there's any gains to be made by retaining some of that. For example, there's a bunch of fields, and maybe this is another meeting, but there's lots of fields that some fields that I have in my own workflows that may not be available as Darwin Core fields. And
Yeah, that makes sense. there are limitations because, everyone wants certain fields. But you probably already know this, but if you're adding a record, so I'm in my personal management and I clicked add new record, you can click this go to new record and carry over locality information, and that will handily bring over all the locality information here. So at least you don't have to copy that. But if there are other fields that you're copying, those tools don't exist. But you could use a duplicate searching tool.
But this is always the hard part because collectors tend to have really detailed, great information, but the rest of the biodiversity community doesn't have a standardized place for those data. And so oftentimes you'll get a collector who has a lot of columns in the spreadsheet that are filled out, and then you as the curator are forced to figure out how to import those data. And then you end up doing all this manual work to concatenate columns so that you preserve the information, and then you upload those concatenated fields. And it's a huge time suck for the curators. And so it, as much as possible, being constrained to the columns that are going to get imported is a better situation. And I guess that's one other thing that I'll say. So I have some collectors who may or may not be on this call who are probably never going to get away from their spreadsheet. And I have a header Excel file that I send them that has the headers that I know I'm going to bring in. And so that's one, they might not be managing their records in, but at least they're going to produce a spreadsheet that's easier for me to upload.
Yeah, and if you want them to send their data and then you print out all their labels using a specific format that you have in your collection, that's also a possibility that completely bypasses the specimen observation type. But if that works, it works. Well, thanks everyone for your time. And I'm sure that there are more questions that will come up as you start working with this. One thing I think I did not mention very clearly is you need to, in order to edit in one of these personal observation profiles, you need to be sponsored, which is just like you need to have been given permissions by someone. And that someone just has to be the administrator of a collection in the portal that you're working in. So it can be a super admin, or it can be an admin for some other collection. So
is that true for the observation entries we were just talking about too? Like you need to have the curator of the herbarium give you permission to add those personal observations, or is that just for?
You need to have an administrator for a collection give you privileges. You are sponsored as a personal observation profile, but you can also reach out to a super admin or a portal administrator, a portal manager, someone who generally works on the portal, and they can give you that access too.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, as I was saying, thank you all for coming, and we're going to see you in the new year. Hope to see you then, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Katie, I have a question before you run off, if you have time.